the expertise. You don't have to tell anybody why you don't want to serve on that committee. You don't have to be guilt tripped into serving. What you have to say is, no, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm honored that you asked. No, thank you. And you can say that 10 times if you have to, because it's far better that you decline at the beginning than that you assume a role and then don't follow through with it, because people will be depending on you and be disappointed. And it goes really to Julie's question. What if somebody comes, says they'll do something and doesn't, or leaves, and then what? So anyway, that's really, really an important thing. Committees in particular, but also the board, open lines of communication are critical. It is really one of the things in teaching board development, but also committee development, that is an absolute poison, is when committees and or the board fall into little groups that talk to each other but don't talk to the whole. So I call Kim, who calls Cecilia, and then the three of us have a conversation, but we all say, well, we can't tell the rest of the committee. No, that doesn't work. It is poison, poison, poison. Because meanwhile, Chris and Ann are moving ahead as though everything is fine. We have a problem that we're not willing to discuss with the group. And all of a sudden things fracture and fall apart. I am a very strong believer in transparency. Certainly also that is coupled with civility. If something isn't going well, it's perfectly okay to say, you know, I'm sort of having a hard time about this. Make it on yourself. I'm having a hard time about this. I don't understand why we're doing this. It doesn't seem like we have the budget. It doesn't seem like we have enough people. It doesn't seem like we have a long enough time to put it together. Those are all valid things to say and important, because it might keep your committee from falling into a crevasse if somebody says, you know, I think she's right. Because one of the things I've discovered, and it's not new with me, it's from a sociologist, is when we're in a group, whether it's committee, the board, the whole, tonight, whatever, one of the great motivators of human beings is we actually do want to get along. We really want everyone to like us. We want to be part of this group. We care about it. We want it all. And so sometimes we'll sit on those things, or I'll just talk to one other person because I'm feeling the pinch, but I don't really want to talk to the whole about it. And suddenly April and I are the only two people who know about this, and no one else does. And it is a valid concern. So either, you know, transparency, open communication, and then professionalism and respect. If you're on a committee with someone and they're not being respectful, or they're being in any way, shape, or form uncivil, I think it's important, maybe not in front of the whole group, to say, could we have a pause for a minute? And then you take that person aside. And this is actually one of the chair's big roles, really back to your question again, is the chair can take that person aside and say, you know, Sally, I'm just real not comfortable with the way things are going. You seem pretty unhappy. Is there something we can do about that? Because you need to find out and you need to squelch any uncivil, unprofessional behavior from the very get-go. Otherwise, things get worse. They never get better if they're not dealt with. And the last part is the way committees work. NAMI Washington is now a big group. Lauren, what's the budget size this year?
For NAMI Washington itself,
yes,
it's our organization is 1.375 million, and then our affiliates have budgets anywhere from about $3,500 a year up to, you know, several $100,000.
Okay. When you put together, you as a board and staff, if you have staff, put together a work plan with what you're going to be doing. The purpose of the committees is to implement that work plan. They are the execution people who actually execute the plan with or without staff. Now, it's different because you're sort of a hybrid organization with affiliates as well as this statewide. Some of you have staff, some of you don't. I'm going to try to address both. I hope I do effectively with that. This is your model is an unusual one, but it's really important to understand again, the committees are what I would call the workhorses of the organization, along with the program and development staff. Lauren's job is to oversee the whole thing. And that doesn't mean that she just sits there eating bonbons, drinking gin, and watching soaps on TV. I know that's hard to believe, but yeah, it's usually what you do. That's what everybody thinks directors do. But what it does mean is that she's going to be the one who needs to be in the know, but isn't necessarily doing the day-to-day program work of the staff and the volunteers on committees. So that's your job. You're a workhorse. If you don't like doing actual on the ground, boots on the ground work, you probably don't belong on a committee.
Hey, Carol, Donna Lurie has her hand up.
I'm sorry, I missed it. Donna, go ahead.
Unmute. Okay.
There
So
you are.
here's my question.
Sure.
We have some affiliates that have officers and volunteers who are all volunteers and committee chairs. Okay. So there's the question of the interplay between committees and officers, because there are some organizations I've been part of where people just assume the officers will take care of everything. So that's part one of the question. Part two is when you have staff, there's also this assumption that staff will take care of everything and that we don't need committees. So if you could talk about the relationship between officers, committees, and staff, that'd be very helpful.
So I
Thanks, Donna.
added that to the goals list, and you can address it now or later.
I will address it when we get to the committee stuff, but I think it's a very important question. And again, because this is a hybrid organization with kind of everything from a budget of $3,500, which means probably no staff, and fairly small governance group, to fairly large budget and significant numbers of staff, it does vary. But the reality still is for all levels, whether it's the NAMI Washington or the affiliate that has a $3,500 budget, if you join a committee, you are expected to and should plan to do the work of the organization as you're assigned. So if you're on the program committee for NAMI of Southwest Washington, and you guys have 3 programs you do, plus you do the peer-to-peer training, maybe there's 4 committees in the whole affiliate. What you decide to do is part of that work. If you're a chair of one of those committees, your job is to oversee that your committee members do that work as well. And also you yourself as the committee chair may take on a part of that work. But each committee member should be reporting back to you, whether it's in a committee meeting or individually or however you set it up, what that person has actually accomplished. And then the chair's job is to report that back to the board. Now, with organizations that have officers, Donna, just quickly, are you thinking of an organization where the officers are board members and they're the only board members, or there's more than that, officers plus board members?
Well, at NAMI's side, there are officers, there are board members, there are committees, and there are staff. We have all.
Okay, all of them. Because what I would say then is, my best advice is if you have enough board members, one of every board member's responsibilities should be to serve on at least one committee, often as the chair, because what the chairs do is they are the liaison between the individual committee and the board as a whole. And you want to keep the board apprised as well as the staff apprised of what the committee's doing. And if you made an agreement, let's say you're on the program committee and you're supposed to have an event that's supposed to happen and culminate at the end of April. And mid-March comes and you know you're not going to make that deadline. The board should know that, the staff should know that as soon as possible, because what you can do is retool. Okay, we're not going to be done by the end of April. Let's move that event to the end of May. It's much more effective there. Or maybe something comes up that you had no control over. COVID, for example. Suddenly you have to pivot. Again, it's
Uh-oh. It's Carol, right? It's not me? Okay. Carol, you're frozen.
Doesn't this kind of prove her point?
Good point. Well, and it's no one's fault. It's just the internet can be spotty.
Completely out of our control. Just
Completely.
like all the other fun things that happen.
Yes. Another thing that I'd like us to talk about at some point
I'm
is
sending her a note in the chat.
convincing board members that they don't have to be the committee, that we need people who are not on the board to serve on the committee.
Okay, I'm adding.
Otherwise, it's way too much work for the board member.
I'm back.
Hi.
Somehow my screen froze and then I disappeared. I don't know what happened, but it's the joy of
Welcome back.
technology.
We just
And Donna,
added.
you're right, by the way. You're absolutely right, what you just said.
Okay,
That's
great.
exactly what I was saying when I disappeared. That it is really important that the board be informed of what the committees are doing, that if there's a problem, the board knows about it. Some organizations feel like if there's a problem, I'm going to get my head cut off. That cannot be a canon of the organization. The canon should be, if there's a problem, we should all know about it, because then we can figure out how to fix it. We don't know about it, we don't even know it has to be fixed. And suddenly the example that I gave of this event that was supposed to happen at the end of April that isn't going to happen, we're up against it and suddenly there's no one coming and there's no money and there's no venue. And then you have to say it. And it's far worse than if they knew back in mid-March that we were behind. So that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of how this works. Are there other questions about this part of it, either the role of committees or sort of an overall governance canon? Oh, I know one other thing I should point out. There are different types of committees. Some are what are called standing committees. Standing committees are committees that will probably last over time, like the fundraising or development committee, the nominating committee, the program committee. Those committees you always need. The board of directors. Then there are others that I call ad hoc committees, and they may be needed for a short period of time. For example, if you were hiring a new executive director, you might need to create a hiring committee, and that committee would last for as long as it takes to hire and orient the new director, and then it would sunset. Maybe you needed a committee because there was a really important piece of legislation going through the State House in Olympia, and you really needed a lobbying committee to make sure that you had lobbyists down there, citizen lobbyists, every week that bill was being discussed and that you had volunteers lined up to testify. And so you do that, you have an ad hoc committee for Bill 6783. It gets through, session ends, that committee can sunset. There is nothing wrong with a committee leaving. Some organizations have public relations and communications committees. I have found those, frankly, to be the hardest ones to keep going because they tend to fall to the bottom of the barrel of priorities for organizations with everything else that's going on. And I would advise you not to have one if you don't have significant enough people and staff to do it. You can do communications without a committee. And the goal is, does this actually help us or does this create more work for us? Are there other questions? Comments? Good. Okay, let's move on and take a look at the specific roles of committee chairs. And that's page 2 of that agenda. Oh, one last thing I forgot to mention. I recommend that whether you're an affiliate or NAMI Washington, that you create job descriptions for each of the committees that you have. Because let's say I want to recruit someone to be on my development committee, fundraising committee. I want to recruit somebody who knows something about raising money. I want to recruit somebody who likes the idea of raising money. I want to be able to tell them that this is going to take about 20 hours a month of your time, that we meet every third Thursday or every other third Thursday or once a month or twice a year or however often. And it's really important to outline what are the tasks, what's the time, what's the expertise that's needed. And that when you go to recruit somebody, so I go to Deanna and I say, Deanna, I want you to serve on the fundraising committee. Here's a job description of what we do. I think you'd be really good at it. And I know you've raised money for other things. Would you be interested in serving? And then Deanna has something to actually look at to say, am I signing up where I'm going to be giving my life away or with a relatively manageable task or whatever? So it's really important, I think, to, if you don't have them already, to create job descriptions for the committee as you would have one for the board of directors. Okay. Anything else that anybody has? Good, let's go on to committee chairs. Being a committee chair is a really important part of this job. And much depends on whether, when you're a committee chair, you are working with a staff member or the executive director who is a staff member, or you're working with the board chair, or maybe you're on the board and you don't have any staff, because your role differs. If you're working with a staff member, I'll start with that one. So you are on the program committee. You are the chair of the program committee. You're putting together Lobby Day in Olympia. You're putting together a briefing on pending legislation. You're putting together part of a newsletter that you're going to send out about upcoming programs that NAMI Washington is going to do. And you have a staff member who is the program person for NAMI Washington. First and foremost, your job is not to supervise that staff member. That's really, really important. The job of supervising all staff belongs to the executive director. That is her job. That's why she gets paid the big bucks and has the Learjet. It is extremely.
You guys know we had a NAMI Learjet?
Yeah, well, I'm sure you're going to get one any day now.
It's invisible, just like
Yeah,
Wonder Woman's.
exactly. But it is important because staff members have to know who their boss is. You are a peer with that staff member, and your job is to help that staff member, him or her, to make sure that the committee is doing the tasks that it's assigned. But it is not your job to supervise what that staff member does. If you feel that there is a problem of any type, from really minor, the staff member is always late to meetings, the staff member doesn't ever call you and check in, whatever, your role is to call the director and say, yes,
I'm gonna jump in.
yes,
And I'm
ma'am.
gonna say, I know you're gonna say your role is to call the director. The preference at NAMI Washington anyway, because we believe in one-on-one direct communication, is that you should first have a discussion with the staff member, but not to supervise them, right? So like if they're late to meetings all the time and that's bothering you, as well it should, you should have a one-on-one discussion with that staff member about it, peer to peer. And then if it's not resolved, then call the executive director.
Okay.
Is that okay, Carol?
That's fine. Well, that's fine. That's
Or
the,
if you're uncomfortable having a one-on-one with a staff member, because we do realize that many people in NAMI do have anxiety issues, and it might come around these kinds of potential conflict, constructive feedback conversations, then call your executive director. We're certainly here to support you in that. But I would like to have everybody try to learn really great, effective adult direct communication skills.
that's great. The one thing I would caveat there is the line between communicating and supervising is very important.
Yes.
It's a very fine line. And you've got to make really clear to the staff member, hey, Sally, I'm really enjoying working with you. And it's very difficult when we're supposed to start the meeting at 7:30 and I only have childcare till 8:30, that you show up at 7:45, because then we're kind of rushed or we have to backtrack or whatever. That's fine. But I sometimes find the committee chairs want to sort of take over the supervisory role and also give direction to the staff that may or may not fit their job description. And I'll give you an example. When I was board chair at National NARAL, one of my board members, who was the head of a committee, called my staff. It was a big enough board and a big enough budget that I had a quarter-time staff person to staff the national board meetings, because there were 30 people coming from all over the country. Anyway, the day before the meeting, which is a 3-day meeting, he called my staff member and she said, could you please get the following in my hotel room by tomorrow? And it was a laptop computer and internet connection. This is back in the day when internet was pretty new and blah, 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 blah. And when I got to the office the day before, thank God, the meeting, my staff member Jill was sort of beside herself. She said, I can't believe it. I'm supposed to do all this. I said, no, actually, you're not. And that is going beyond what a committee chair is supposed to do. And I called the board member and I said, Jill's very busy right now. She's putting the board meeting together. You're going to have to take care of these needs for yourself on your own. And it worked. But it's that sort of thing. It's that kind of fine line. So yes, direct communication is great. But I would even rehearse before I meet with a staff member if you have a question about their performance, about what you're going to say, maybe run it by someone else and say, does that sound to you okay? And again, I think Lauren's right. If you're really anxious about doing this, or you have a tendency to react quickly to things without thinking, it might be good to include Lauren in that. Or maybe it can be even a three-way conversation.
Or your affiliated executive director.
Or the affiliate executive director if you're an affiliate.
And you have an executive director. But if you're at an affiliate that doesn't have staff, please know this is one of the things that I'm here for, that NAMI Washington is here for, and that our affiliate, our new to start on May 10th, affiliate and membership manager will be here for, is to support affiliates, staffed or not, in organizational development and with all these things, hence this workshop.
Good. Well, you know, and that's going to be very, very helpful. Now, how many of you who are on this call right now are actually committee chairs now?
Just raise your hands.
Just raise your hands. Looks like about half. How many of you serve on committees but not chairs? Okay, that's about the other half. And then there's a few of you who may be interested at some point in joining. Okay. And how many of you are people who are on, or who are in affiliates that have staff, or you're part of NAMI Washington? A little more than half. Okay. Because that does make a big difference. And it can be a little more problematic if you don't have staff. One of my suggestions would be, if there's no staff, is that you talk also with your board chair. Because your board chair is there actually as a quasi leader in lieu of staff. But you can also get, now I didn't know about this new position that's coming on, but that's very exciting because that will give you someone else to speak with who can really help talk you through. Lauren, did you want to say something else?
I do, because one of the comments in the chat is, my response was, this will be next, is, can you talk about affiliates that don't have a staff? And then of course she said, your board chair, and board presidents, by nature of the definition of board president in your bylaws, is that the board president, for all intents and purposes, in an affiliate without a staff, is the person who would be the micromanagement decision maker, is your board president. And of course, we have board presidents who do it all. So please address situations where there is staff but no executive director. Address situations where there's no staff at all. And then a comment, we struggle to have enough people.
Right, I see that.
To split into committees.
What's
So
that basically?
Caitlin, do you mean you struggle to have enough people on your board to split into committees?
Yeah, basically like the people who are committed and show up to our board meetings, it's basically like an executive committee. And that's kind of the extent of people who are the most active and volunteering and providing their time to the board work.
And Caitlin, do you have other volunteers for other activities, or is it largely this executive committee?
We do have volunteers that are like our facilitators for programs, which some of them are involved in kind of like that executive committee type thing, but and then some of them only facilitate. So yeah, if that makes sense.
It does. And one of the things I guess I would say to you is, are you on the board?
Yes, I'm the board president. I end up
Okay.
kind of doing
Good, okay.
everything.
Because one of the things I would suggest that you sit down with that committee and you sit down and you say, okay, we really need to either bring on more volunteers or cut back on the committees that we have. This is not working. I mean, it's very important not to pretend that we have a public relations committee when it's one person and, you know, they're already stretched thin because they're also the board treasurer. Small affiliates struggle with this.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, sometimes the other way to go with that is to look at establishing only ad hoc committees. So if you're going to be doing an event in May or June, you put together a group of folks who are going to work just on that event. And you're going to do a lobby day in Olympia, and you're going to bring X number of people from your affiliate down to Olympia, and then it's over. Because people sometimes are willing to take on short-term projects. That can even be done, by the way, with fundraising. You can say, we're going to do a fundraising campaign for our affiliate. It's going to run from September to December, because that's actually the best time to raise money. And we need 6 people to assist in putting that together and bring in volunteers so we can raise money during that period, send some letters, send some texts and emails, maybe make some visits, etc. Because I think sometimes ad hoc committees are one way to help with a smaller group of volunteers.
Yeah, that's really helpful, because I think definitely when the pandemic hit, we started moving away from like even trying to act like we have enough people for committees and, you know, just being like, okay, let's just talk about these certain things at our board meetings or via like through email. And I think, you know, we get a lot of people who are interested in being part of the board for a month and then we never hear from them again. And so, you know, like expanding our board, we've really been trying to do that. But I think you're right, moving towards that ad hoc committee for when we need it. And yeah, I appreciate your feedback and your.
Okay, and let me also just say, when you're talking about struggling to bring on enough board members, one of the first things you might want to establish, how many people are on your board?
I believe 7.
Okay, is that active? How many active members?
Active, yes.
Active, good. Okay, one of the things you might do is sit down at your next board meeting and look at creating a nominating committee. Maybe just a couple of people. And you can bring on people that are other than board members to nominating. I served on a nominating committee for an organization where half of our nominating committee were not board members, but they were nominating people for the board because they were well connected in the community. They didn't want to be board members. All they wanted to do was help us get good ones. And it really helped. It really helped. So, you know, that is a good idea, because if you can expand your board a little bit more, imagine if you had 12. That would lighten the load for everybody. And that's one of the ways you can sell this, by the way, because it's true, is to tell people, look, if we brought on 5 new people over the next 2 years, each of our loads would be lightened just a bit. And that includes yours.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
I also just put into the chat a link to the Corporate Giving Network, which matches staff members from corporations throughout Washington State, like Weyerhaeuser, Microsoft, Adobe, Symetra, with nonprofits, and they have a board application you can fill out.
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what that is. Could you explain that again, Lauren?
The Corporate Giving Network is an organization that matches staff members of corporations with nonprofits for board work.
Oh.
In Washington State. And they also have, like, you know, monthly, right now, Zoom gatherings where they feature a nonprofit every month. So if you join their e-news, you'll see all their upcoming events. I just had a meeting with their board match person yesterday. I filled out an application, and, you know, at NAMI Washington, as we go into our next board, you know, we still have a MARCOM deficit. That's marketing and communications, for those of you who didn't know. And I was this old when I found out what MARCOM meant. And also what I said to them was, you're the Corporate Giving Network. I want people to act as connectors. I want people from corporations with deep pockets to act as connectors to other people with deep pockets. that will benefit NAMI. So that was my meeting with them, as well as where we need to diversify in other areas. So that link is in the chat for you all.
That's a great link, because I didn't even know about that. And I think those kinds of things can be very helpful, because there are lots of people, in particularly mid-level people in corporations, that are looking for a volunteer job and really don't have the time, excuse me, to vet themselves all the various organizations that are out there. So if this is an organization that does the vetting for them and says, hey, Frank, you'd be really good working with NAMI of Southwest Washington, I think that's a perfect job for you, and you live right there, and it would be very helpful. I will add a caveat about corporate volunteers.
They train them.
Oh, good. Well, then I won't add the caveat.
They give them training on how to serve on a nonprofit board, your role as a board member in a nonprofit, and how it's different from corporate work. So they're already giving them that training before they even get to the match point.
Okay, good. Because that's been a problem
thing,
in the past, where people just want it on their resume.
Right. The only other thing I forgot to tell you is that they charge a fee of $475 if somebody is matched. However, they tell that person, you are expected to make an annual contribution of at least $1,000 to $1,500, and that $475 is expected to come out of their annual contribution. So they're already starting their expectation with a corporate board member to be a donor at a major donor level.
Good. That's great. Great. Other questions before we move on, or comments? These are really helpful.
I struggle to
What?
address situations where there is staff but no executive director. There's staff. Okay, so NAMI South King County has 2 different kinds of program staff, but they don't have an executive director.
Okay. And do you know how many committees they have? Is anybody on this call from them?
Marcia is here.
Marcia. So
I'm
how
here.
does that work?
We have one standing committee and a bunch that are not really tightly defined. Like programs.
Okay.
So
And you have 2 program staff?
yes,
Are they full-time?
part-time.
Both part-time. Do they have specific programs that they represent?
Yes,
And you also have a board, I assume.
yes,
How large is your board?
7 people.
Okay, and is it pretty active?
We have a bunch of people. Everybody on the board works a job except one person.
So they're limited in
They
time.
don't have time. Yeah.
Okay, okay. I think that's an interesting question. And I would caution you to have very many committees. I mean, certainly to have some committees that would support each of those staff members' jobs would be really a good idea. But I would look very long and hard at creating clear job descriptions for those committees. Now, you can have committees with people who are not members of the board. And that's going to be a job for the board members and the staff members to do some recruiting, to find some people who don't want to spend time with governance issues, but would love to help you put on a program or a lobby in Olympia, or bring a bunch of people to the Brainpower Chronicles, or whatever else you want that committee to do. But I think having a clear job description with an amount of time involved would be very, very important. And then who supervises your staff?
The president.
The board president?
No, yeah, I mean, that's the overall, and they work together. We have one other person that's supposed to be supervising as well.
Okay, but you said supposed to be, that's not happening?
Well, I don't know. They've only been on board for a month, so we'll see how it goes.
Okay, okay, because I was going to say that's an issue where you, as the executive committee of the board and probably the board president, would be the one that you would go to put together the work plan for that committee, and then the committee members would execute it. But the committee members, I don't think should be the one supervising that staff member. I think that is really difficult because the committee chair and the committee members and the staff are peers. Somebody else has to be doing the supervising, which isn't to say you can't say, let's all sit down and talk about who's going to do this, who's going to do this, who's going to do this, who's going to do this. And one of the roles, one of the to-dos is done by, or several of them, by a staff member. But it's more difficult when you don't have an executive director, because it is more lateral. It would be the board chair that would be probably at the top of that in terms of supervision.
All right.
Other
Thank you.
models.
I'm thinking of the model that we have.
Yeah, good.
We have 5 people on our board. We have always had trouble getting people on the board, right? And so I'd say 2 of them are really involved. And then we have 2 part-time staff. And I think everyone that's working or that's doing volunteering or participating in NAMI really does a lot. I mean, they are working their tails off, including most of our volunteers, you know. So the idea of having committees, after listening to what you're saying, it seems that the ad hoc committee would be the way to go, and also really focusing on looking for board members, maybe. I don't know.
I think you're exactly right. What are your staff members' jobs?
Well, yeah, my title is executive director, and then I have a staff member that's like a peer coordinator. But you know, I do a lot of what a program director would do too. I mean, it's just because we're small, you know, and we don't have a huge budget, and I guess fundraising is the other really important ad hoc committee, because we do a fundraiser every year. So
Yeah.
Carol, can I answer first?
Yeah. Sure.
You need to, every affiliate who's on this call, if you're thinking about changing how your committees are structured, meaning standing versus ad hoc, you must refer to your bylaws. Your bylaws will say what your standing committees currently are. Usually they're exec and fundraising. If there's one, well, yeah. But please remember to look at your bylaws, because if you want to change the way that your committees are, you're going to have to update the language in your bylaws. Carol, back to you.
That's exactly right. The other one that's often in bylaws is program, or some variety of program.
Fund development's usually there too. And I was going to say, I would expect fund development to be a standing committee, but I could also see it being ad hoc during this season and ad hoc during this season for a really small affiliate that's like NAMI South King County or NAMI Whatcom.
Exactly. And the other thing, Kim, that I guess I would say to you is your instincts are exactly right around expanding the size of your board. And one of the things you can do as the executive director is you can encourage 1 or 2 board members to become part of a nominating committee along with yourself, to start looking and scouting out who might be likely board members, and then putting together a board job description. You know, again, I am a strong believer in written board descriptions, written job descriptions, because it reassures particularly the people you want on the board, who tend to be more professional, who tend to be looking at what am I getting into here, as opposed to, am I just breathing and filling a seat? That's not what you need. I mean, those people can be sort of a pain, frankly, and sometimes destructive. You want somebody who's coming in with a particular skill set.
Yeah, we never want anybody on our boards who is just there to do what Carol wants. What Carol is saying, not what Carol wants.
No, and the other thing is, if you have particular skill needs, so you know Sally Ann, and she's a lovely person, and she's very committed to NAMI, but you already have 3 other people on your board who meet the exact same skill set and demographic as Sally Ann. She might not be appropriate now, but one of the other things, and this is true for all of you, by the way, with your committees and your board, when you are recruiting people to be on committees or on the board of directors, which is a committee, if somebody says, I'm really too busy now, the next question is, can I put you on a list for future reference? When I left one of the organizations where I actually started the board nominating committee, we started with everybody saying, no one wants to be on this board. When I left 4 years later, we had a 3-year waiting list of people who said, I can't do it this year, but I'm going off another board. I would love to join you a year from now. We just kept a rolling list of people who could fill that slot at some point. Or maybe they had a skill set. Maybe they were a person who was really good in communications, but you have a good communications person, but that person may go off, then you bring on the new person. So just because they are like the organization and they're alive is not the reason. It's what skills do they bring? What demographics do they bring? And the way to figure that out, by the way, is to do a matrix listing the demographics you're looking for and the skills you're looking for, and then ask the existing committee members, including the board, to check off what do they meet, and then see where are your gaps. Oh, we really need a legal person. Oh, we really need a finance person. Oh, we really need somebody who is connected to corporations. Whatever you decide, and I don't know, Lauren, if you still have my matrix template, but if you're interested, you can text me later or through Lauren, and I'll send out a template for a matrix. It's very easy for board members to fill out. And it's often really interesting for them because they say, oh, we need finance. Well, I should talk to my CPA. I bet you he'd be really interested in this. You hadn't even thought about him before that. But when that comes up, suddenly he pops into your mind.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Other ones? Is anybody at this point feeling somewhat discouraged about the possibility of having effective committees? Kim's nodding.
Julie Melville shaking her head yes, but NAMI Skagit is in an unusual situation right now.
What is
Barbie
that?
Young, and then Barbie has her hand up. Well,
I can't see Barbie, so I don't know if she has her hand up.
Right.
Barbie,
Her
do you
hand
want to say
is up.
something?
Well, Barbie,
Yep.
go ahead.
That was a mistake. I was trying to look at the chat and figure things out, and I hit
Oh,
my
okay.
phone. So I feel good
Okay,
about it.
Okay.
Great.
And can
Julie-
I add something about NAMI East Side? So when I was recruited as a volunteer and then recruited onto the board, it was a very small board. And the board was basically burning out because it was the same people over and over again who were active volunteers, and they did everything.
Yeah.
And that was not sustainable. So one of the things that we did was look at what were the needs on the board, how was the board going to work as a team with the small staff that we had at the time. And then we went out and recruited people for those skill sets. And we purposely did not recruit active volunteers who were going to support groups or in peer classes. We recruited people like Ann Fitch, who is, connected to some corporate folks and is in the area of wellness. I don't know if Ann can hear me, but she offers a different perspective and a different skill set. Bob is coming on board as our new treasurer. Now, Bob has been involved with NAMI for a long time, but Bob's got a finance background, and our treasurer wants to retire. So we work together to find someone that has a finance background, and so that there's a transition period between the two. But we purposely expanded the board. I think there were 6 when I first came on board to 9. And we just got a bylaws change this past January to 11. And the reason is because we want a more diverse board. We had 10% BIPOC when I came on. We're 33% BIPOC. We want to move to 50% BIPOC. And the way that you do that is by expanding the board and recruiting people from different communities. So that's part of it, is that, you know, many hands make light work. And if you can look at other sources for the board, I think that we tend to look at the usual suspects, and we really need to go beyond that. And that's where Barbie and our staff have been enormously helpful to say, look at these other organizations and other community groups to find future board members.
Good.
And I've
Can I
put,
ask you, Donna, when you decided on what you needed, how did you figure out what your needs were?
We talked as a board. We also looked at how we were getting the work done and where there were gaps.
Okay.
We looked at what perspectives are we missing. So for example, we have recruited Paul Charbonneau to be on our board to help us with advocacy, because he's a lot younger than some of our board members. And we did not want a board of all semi-retired, retired
Right.
folks. So we wanted to make sure we had some age diversity as well. So
Great.
you look at skill sets, you look at demographics, you look at what connections do they have, you look at, are they a team player? There are people who are very talented, but they can't work with a group of people. And that's a problem.
Right. Yeah, one of the things that I recommend in terms of recruitment, both for committees and for the board, which is a committee again, is that when you're doing it, you make sure when you're recruiting someone that you're recruiting them to be a candidate for the board, not to be on the board. And that you sit down, one or two of you, and if you have staff, a staff member, or if you don't have staff, the board president, and you sit and you just have coffee with them and talk through, what is it like to be on this board? How much time does it take? What's the issues? What are you looking for them to do? And make it very clear to them, and make it very clear if it's a board member, we're looking for you to help fundraise, because it's really annoying to people if they're brought on either to a committee or the board and not be told what they're expected to do. They come on thinking they're expected to do one thing, and then suddenly they're told, okay, now you have to go raise money. And they say, well, no one talked to me about raising money. I'm not going to raise money. I'm on a development committee for a national organization. And we went through this problem where somebody was recruited from, she's a vice president at Google, and she absolutely refused to raise money for the organization. She said, no one said that to me, and I don't want to raise any money. And, you know, I mean, here she was brought on with all these great star qualities, but nobody managed to mention to her, that's why you're being recruited. And it's really important, again, to find out. Another example of this, by the way, is with our big high-tech community here in the Northwest. Some people are brought on and everybody assumes they're brought on to be the high-tech person. High-tech people sometimes don't want to be high-tech in their volunteer work. That's their paid work. They want to be on the program committee and they want to go lobby in Olympia. Make sure you ask them, just because they have that skill, is it one that they want to put time into at NAMI? Is it one that they want to put time into on your committee? And be really respectful. And if they say, no, I don't want to do that, say, great, I really appreciate knowing that. Because it's terrible to bring someone on for the wrong reasons. Go ahead, Donna.
I do think that it is a two-way conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also asking the board candidate, what would they like to work on? And how do they think they can contribute to the organization?
Right.
Because no one wants to be pigeonholed, and people want to feel like their service on the board is meaningful to them. So it's not just what the organization's needs are, but how does this fulfill that person's sense of satisfaction?
And let's move on now just for a moment to the committees particularly.
well,
But it also
Carol,
applies-
before we move on,
Yes,
can I just follow up on some things in the chat?
sure.
I think it is confusing when you say the board is a committee. The board has some very specific governance responsibilities that
Right.
is not the work of committees. Please clarify.
Yeah, that's really important. The board's job is an overarching governance role. They set the overarching policies and procedures for either NAMI Washington or your particular affiliate for each calendar year. They also supervise and evaluate staff or the executive director. They are the ones who make sort of the big mega decisions. And committees are, again, back to what I said at the beginning, committees are charged with executing and developing strategies and tactics and executing them that will fulfill the goals that the board has established.
Thank
The way
you.
they are brought on, though, is very similar. It's just that the roles are different. And that's why, again, back to, I'm sorry to repeat myself often, but job description, job description, job description. Make it very clear to people if they're being recruited for the board or they're being recruited for a program committee or for a governance committee or whatever, or the nominating committee, what are they expected to do? Now, we're people. We're not just in silos. And so a person on the nominating committee may say along the way, hey, you know, I really think this organization would do well if we sponsored a lobby day. Just our affiliate with our legislators at home during one of their in-town meetings or something. And then it's up to the program committee, the staff, et cetera, or the board, depending on the size of your organization, to say, yeah, that's a really good idea. But understanding, having the committee member understand, this is just an idea, you're throwing it out. Lots of good ideas come from people. And I always believe in listening to everyone. You know, I always believe that everybody in the room was a thoughtful person. But if you're on a committee, your job is to fulfill the needs of that committee and the responsibilities of that committee.
Thank you, Carol.
Sure.
Does a treasurer need to be a board member? And again, this goes back to your bylaws. A treasurer is an officer and officers are from your board. Carol?
Well, ordinarily I would say yes. I'm trying to think now in my experience if I've ever had a treasurer not be on the board.
I think you can have workarounds. I think you could have somebody who, so NAMI Washington, several years ago, we brought on a brand new board member. So it was their first year and we brought them on as the treasurer and they lasted 3 months and they resigned. So I think that you can have a treasurer and a treasurer in training, or you can have somebody who's a treasurer in name and Val. Let's say the person from Jeffco doesn't want to, and then let's say the person from Jeffco who's interested in being in the treasurer but doesn't want to be on the board. Maybe you can have them work with a board officer who is treasurer and they're on the finance committee and they find a way to work together. And then I also want to add a note from NAMI Washington's governance committee chair, Roseanne. I do think the treasurer is a board position, but in smaller orgs, I don't understand what your chat message says, Roseanne. Can you unmute and clarify this?
I belong to a nonprofit where we had a treasurer that was also functioning as the accountant. And I really pushed for having an accountant so that those duties were separate.
Yeah,
So
those duties definitely
in smaller
need to-
organizations, I think we tend to make that treasurer also the accountant. It's a separate function. The treasurer on the board oversees the entire financial wellness of the organization, and a separate person should be accounting for the books, helping to do the day-to-day. In this organization I'm speaking of, it's not a NAMI organization, but it's, you know, the treasurer was collecting weekly dues, and that needed to happen. Those functions and duties needed to be separated.
I work with an organization right now that has a budget of about 250,000. And one of their board members has been the treasurer of the organization basically since its inception, which is about 20 years. And he's about to retire. And we were talking just yesterday, I was talking with the executive director about this. And I said, you know, he's been doing this for so long and he's really, really good. But I said, he's a very unusual person because he's been pretty much retired for the last 10 years. And this has been his job. And it's a volunteer job, but he certainly has taken it as his job. I said, it's going to be highly unlikely that you find somebody who can do those two things. And I'm much more of a position, also from a legal standpoint, that you have an accountant who is separate from the treasurer. They should work together. And certainly the treasurer should understand how to read a financial statement, et cetera, and be able to sort of watchdog what the accountant is doing and report to the board what the accountant is doing. But I don't necessarily think they should be the same person at all.
Or a bookkeeper in
Yeah.
place of the
Yeah.
accountant.
Bookkeeper is fine. And there
I
also
agree
are
with you,
organizations, for those of you with smaller affiliates, there are bookkeepers out there now who will contract with you for a certain number of hours per month just to keep your books. I had a client who did that. She was very, very effective. She was so effective that she actually had 4 people working for her. And they would go pick up the books once a month, reconcile all the books, take them back, go over it with the treasurer and the executive director. And it was really a good system and very reasonable for each individual organization. So it doesn't have to be that you have to have an accountant on your staff.
Right. Okay. Now back to committees.
Okay, let's go back to committee chairs for a minute. Let's say that you have 3 committees. You have a development committee, a program committee, and a finance committee. I'm just making those up. You've decided that these are going to be the 3 standing committees that you have, and they're in your bylaws, and you're all cool about that. And you really want to recruit chairs. First and foremost, I would look at existing volunteers and members of the board. Are there anybody there who might be interested? And prior to that, you put together a job description. What is this committee? What is the finance committee? What is its job? What does the chair do? The chair's role is to facilitate the operations of the committee and work with the staff if there are staff, or with the volunteers if there are just volunteers, or both, to make sure that the tasks of the committee are completed. So you've got your job description together, you've got your committee description together, you start to recruit. Again, you recruit just as you would for a board for candidates. You don't offer anyone the job. That's the board, board of directors' responsibility. But you bring to the board a resume or a write-up about this person, and it's Julie Melville Skagit, and she's very interested in serving as the chair of the finance committee, and she's got a finance background, and she's been involved with NAMI for 5 years. Now, committee chairs don't have to be already members of the organization, but I think it definitely helps. Definitely helps, because otherwise the learning curve is a lot longer, because they're learning NAMI as well as that committee, as well as membership and working with the members. So I would encourage you to look for people who have some experience either with NAMI Washington or with your affiliate. They've got to have the right skill set. And whoever it was who said they had recruited somebody younger to be the treasurer, demographics matter, and age is really an issue for an awful lot of nonprofits right now. I'm of an age where I'm always encouraging younger people to join boards, to join committees, et cetera. I'm more than willing to pass the torch. I think it's definitely time. And also they bring a different perspective. They've grown up in a world that's very different than the world that I grew up in. And so I like hearing that difference and being able to respond to it. Once they're on, somebody says, does the board need to vet candidates for ad hoc committees like the NAMI Walk team? That's a good question. Lauren, do you have any ideas about, yeah.
I do. So I have to go back and agree with Carol. And of course, this is not in a setup where every committee is an ad hoc committee, but where you have standing committees. Our preference, and we certainly have the people at NAMI Washington, to be able to have our chairs already be members of the board, because they're the liaison back to the board. But the committee members for NAMI Washington do not need to be approved by the board. They need to be approved by that committee chair.
Right.
And if it's an already existing committee, it's a discussion among the already existing committee members, but it doesn't go back to the board. There's nothing in our bylaws that requires that. And as far as I know, there's nothing in any affiliate bylaws that requires committee members to be approved by any affiliate board of directors. So did that answer that question?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I would say particularly with regard to things like the NAMI walk, I would say that it is really important that that committee understand what its role is, because the NAMI walk is your big fundraiser. And so that's where you're going to want to have people who are interested in helping to turn out walkers and raise contributions for those walkers. And they to understand that that's their job, because I haven't been now, it's been 2 years since I've been involved with NAMI, but I know one of the frustrations has been that sometimes some of the affiliates don't have the bandwidth really to bring many volunteers and many walkers to the walk. And so having an ad hoc committee just around the walk to me seems like a very, very good idea. And again, I would say that the chair of that committee should again be someone who has some experience with the walk and some experience with NAMI and some experience with volunteer turnout. Because basically what you're going to be doing is sending a lot of texts, a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails to people saying, you know, we're recruiting people. Would you like to be part of our walk team? Would you like to sponsor a walk member? Blah, 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 blah. And that's how you get more and more and more people involved. Because the walk is one of those things where the more people involved, the more money you're going to raise. And that's the purpose of the walk. Somebody, Roseanne just also added in the chat, I think if possible, chairs should be on the board. I would agree with that. Sometimes it isn't possible. But one of the things that you should build into your board agendas is committee reports. So depending on how often your board meets, you get reports from the committee.
In writing before the meeting.
Before the meeting, they're part and and then referred to at that particular part of the meeting, you know, with any updates that are needed. And again, back to what I said at the beginning, it can include, hey, we said we were going to get this done by April, but we're not going to get there. We need to reorganize. It is fine to let people know when you're not going to meet a goal, much better than they find out at the last minute. Okay, next deals with conflicts, and this goes to Julie's question at the very beginning. If you have a situation where you have a board committee member, and you're the chair of the committee now, and I'm going to assume for this purpose that all of you are at least considering being chairs of committees. You have a committee, and you have a committee member that for one reason or another really isn't pulling his or her weight. And it can be a number of things. It can be not coming to meetings. It can be coming to meetings, agreeing to do things and not doing them, or not doing them on time and not letting anyone know. It can be the person that I call the disruptor. Disruptor people spend their lives disrupting things. We all know somebody like that. They walk into a room and within 5 or 10 minutes, they have disrupted something. And it's usually, they would say they tend to act as though they're the victims. But in fact, they've thrown some kind of a cocktail, Molotov cocktail, into a conversation that gets everybody riled up. And in a committee where you're really task focused, this can be extremely destructive because you're so busy trying to deal with this blow up that you can't get to the business at hand. So here's my recommendations with regard to being a committee chair dealing with a difficult committee member. The first step is that you sit down over coffee or tea with that person and you make it very clear in advance. Hey, Sally, I want to take you out for tea. I've got some concerns about the fundraising committee and I really want to talk it through with you. When can we get together? I think this should be, if possible, a face-to-face meeting. With COVID, I know that isn't always possible. It's fine to do FaceTime if you can. Less good, but okay, is by phone. I had to do one by phone one time because the person was across the country from me. And it was pre-FaceTime. But then you sit down, you have your coffee, you say, how are you doing? You don't start in with, I'm really concerned about what you're doing, but how are you doing? What do you think about the committee? Open-ended questions start, because they may tell you what you are going to tell them. You know, I signed up to be on the fundraising committee thinking that I was going to do XYZ. But in fact, you expect me to call people and ask them for money. I hate doing that. I don't want to do it. Oh, maybe this isn't the right committee for you. Do you think you'd do better if you were on the NAMI walk committee, where you were just asking people to do sponsorships and join the walk? Yeah, that would be much better for me. That's a big way to solve a problem. But sometimes people are very unaware of what they do. And so it's not always that simple. And so you ask them and they say, well, yeah, I'm on that committee and I'm not really happy with the way that Fred is behaving, and I'm not really happy with the way the staff member is behaving, and I'm not really happy with this, and I'm not really happy with that. And I think we all need to fix that. And what they're saying is, I'm not aware that I'm the problem, it's everybody around me. Everybody's out of step but me. At which point you have to say, well, I'm really sorry to tell you this, and it's hard for me to say this to you, because I really respect the fact that you love NAMI and you really want to do well by us. But in fact, I'm noticing that you're not coming to about half of our meetings. And you said you were going to do this task, and it's still sitting, waiting to be done. And I know your life must be busy. Do you think you really have time to be on this committee? And then you wait. You wait for a long time. I had to do this with a board member who was brilliant. And this was a national board. She was in LA. She was managing 3 clinics in LA. And she was going to be my roommate. She was my roommate in Washington, D.C. when we got together. But she'd missed 4 out of the past 5 board meetings and didn't tell anybody that she wasn't coming. So we had sent her all the materials. We'd arranged for hotel, for meals, etc. And then she just didn't show up. And so I had to say to her, Raquel, I don't think you have time to be on this committee. And she started to cry because she was very committed to the issue. And I said, Raquel, I'm really sorry. And she said, oh, I'm sure I can do better. I said, that would be great. And when you can, let me know and we'll reconsider you for board membership. But right now you're filling a slot, but you're not really filling it. And we need everybody who can actually be there. Now, if it's the bomb thrower person, the person who's forever disrupting everything, that's the most difficult one of all to handle. And at that point, as committee chair, you may actually want to involve more than just yourself at that coffee or tea. If you can recruit somebody else, whether it's a staff member or another committee member, to come with you, or the board president to come with you, it is double teaming. But sometimes people like that need to be double teamed. And you need to say, you know, I noticed that you made XYZ comment at the last meeting, and it really did seem to offend a number of people. Were you aware that you did that? And wait. And they say, well, I didn't really mean it that way. I was just kidding. Or, well, they just are so overly sensitive. That's a big one. Well, he's just overly sensitive. And then what you have to say is, you know, I was offended by that comment. I have to tell you, I went away feeling badly about it. And it really did seem to derail a little bit of our collegiality as a committee. Do you think you can tone that down? And then wait and see what they say. Well, I didn't really do anything wrong. I'm fine. It's them, et cetera, et cetera. Then you have to say, maybe, I'm sorry, I don't think this is going to work. It's just not helping the committee for you to be there and people walking away upset. Now, that's very easy for me to say and very, very hard to do. Because you may, particularly with the person who is a disruptor, they at that point may well disrupt. So you have to go in with your Kevlar on, prepared for the fact that they're going to say something maybe personal to you. Maybe they're going to go home and call Lauren at national, even if they're an affiliate, or at the state level, and say, Lauren, I can't believe this just happened. I've been so loyal to NAMI for so long, and I'm a big donor, and I was just asked to leave the development committee. So you might want to apprise Lauren, if it's that person, in advance, or your own executive director or other people, that they may well get a phone call. And then the last thing as a chair that you do is you ask and say, are you willing to resign at this point? Usually they are, but not always. If they're not, then you may have to say, we're going to put you on probation, but if things don't get better in the next 2 months, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the committee. Or maybe if it's gotten so bad, you might have to ask them to leave then. And then be prepared for repercussions. Because depending on that person, they may well call somebody else in the organization and just talk about what a terrible person you are, that you took them out on very specious grounds, and that you terminated them from a job that you've loved and worked so hard on, and blah, 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 blah. And when you get that phone call from that other person saying, what the heck happened? You can say, I really can't discuss this because I don't want to violate his or her privacy, but no, she's not going to serve on that committee anymore. And thanks a lot for calling me. Always be gracious. You can even be gracious to the bomb thrower and say, I know you've cared about this organization, and I hope you can find a role where you're comfortable and where we can work with you more, much better over time. Dealing with the issues that you deal with members who have some of those issues makes it even more problematic. And so I would think long and hard, and I would actually rehearse before I go to meet with the person if it's one of the disruptor types. You know, if it's a person who's simply not available, it's usually easier because they will see if you point out to them that they're just not coming and they're not doing the jobs they were asked to do. Usually they're fine about resigning. They may be sad about it because they really did intend to do the work, but they won't be angry about it. The ones that are angry are tough. And that's one of the things we take on when we take on being the chair of an organization.
Or a committee.
Or a committee.
So that was a lot of heavy stuff that a lot of people are uncomfortable with because it's direct one-on-one addressing potential conflicts. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up? Donna.
Well, I have two things. And I say this as a trained mediator, so I've dealt with conflict a lot. One is I have found it helpful to have a set of ground rules that all the board or people on a committee commit to ahead of time, so that when you have the conflict, you have that set of ground rules.
Well, that's a great idea.
So that it's not you personally trying to steer a person in a certain direction. It's we've all committed to these conduct rules, and here's how we are going to conduct ourselves. And I have used that with board members that may say, you know, horrible things about a staff member in public or other situations. So that's one idea.
Great idea.
The other is that sometimes the disruptor is simply somebody who's incredibly dedicated, but they're burned out. And they've served for a long time and they've had it, but they're afraid to tell you they've had it. And so their way of demonstrating that they've had it is to be a disruptor. So that's another thing to think about, is maybe the person is not being difficult. They're really struggling with how to say goodbye.
I think those are both excellent suggestions. You know, one of the things I believe about teenagers when they're about to go away to college is they can often be totally awful to their family, and it's because that's the way they can leave. And I think the same thing is true for people who are burned out. And they sometimes don't even know that they're burned out. They just know that they're just not happy. And so they take it out. And one of the things to say to that person, if they've been around for a while and you're getting a sense that perhaps it's that, hey, I notice you've been on this, you know, involved in this organization for 8 years. Do you think you need a break? You don't even have to say leave, just do you need a break? That's a very much more neutral way than you're fired. And often, again, the person will say, maybe I do. Or if they don't, say, well, I'd like you to at least think about that. I also like the idea of ground rules. It's why I always start with housekeeping when I do meetings, because I think it's really important that we understand at the beginning that civility and professionalism are why we're there. We might not like that person. It's okay. You don't have to invite them to your birthday party. But during the course of the meeting, you will be civil to them and you will be professional and you'll treat them with respect, even if you disagree with everything that they say. And right now, I think we're in a low period, although I've been thrilled with our current administration and how professional and empathetic and caring they've been, because maybe we'll start to get back to that again. For a while, we had a lot of role modeling of being horrible. and that was okay to do. And it culminated attacking the Capitol of the United States. Other comments or questions or suggestions? These are really helpful, by the way.
Hi, Carol, just want to let you know it's 7:06, so we have about 24 minutes left.
I know. Yep, I've been watching too. Thank you. And we may end early. It's fine.
Yeah, that's fine
We've got one
too.
more section, but I want to make sure that we deal with. Let me ask you this. One of the things that I like to do with this kind of thing right now is do what I call problem solving. Problem solving means you have a particular problem with your board member or committee member, Sally, and you're looking for suggestions of how to handle it. Does anybody have a situation like that that they'd like to have some feedback on?
Not that they want to talk about with this entire group.
Well, that may be one of the things you can do. My email address is
Rosemary is, okay, wait a minute. Rosemary and Kim. Rosemary's the president of Wacom.
Let Rosemary go. We'll probably see this.
Go ahead, Rosemary.
I wanted to defer to Kim. Let Kim describe the situation. We have a volunteer who is so active and so good that, and she's so helpful to everyone except the board members and anyone else in authority. She really fights authority. And there's many times I've wanted to ask her to be on the board, but I'm scared to death to have her on the board because she would run roughshod over everybody.
So tell me quickly, Rosemary, what is she good at?
She's good at relating to people who come to the family support groups and the family to family classes. And she is a superb hand holder for people in crisis. She is a good advocate. She's just a powerful person.
And how
yet
does she
can
treat
be
people in
extremely
authority?
negative and extremely critical and extremely bullheaded.
So can you give me an example of when she behaved like that, either you or Kim?
She speaks negatively about the organization in public.
Yes. And I was on a committee with her where she told me I was foolish and that I had turned against NAMI because I became the president of NAMI, of the board. And she said, that's what you get for becoming a president of the board. You know, you act like you know it all and you want to make decisions for me. And this was just because I expressed an opinion on what I thought should be included in the new bylaws.
Oh dear.
And that she didn't like. And we did our best to accommodate her wishes. And they were valid ones. A little on the outside as far as I was concerned, but valid. And, we worked it out. It's like we have such a small board. We have only 5 members and 4 of them are officers and every one of them has a job to do. And we're all on all the committees. We all fulfill some committee functions besides being members of the board. So there's a lot of work for the few of us to do, and we have lots of dedicated volunteers. Most of them want to be just program volunteers. They don't want to get involved with the administration.
Can I ask you, have you ever spent some one-on-one time with this woman?
No. Although every time we see each other, we're happy to see each other, and she loves my dog, and she's very, I like her a lot. She's just a difficult person to work with on some levels.
Well, here's a suggestion, and then I'd be open to the group of other suggestions that you might have. My first suggestion is that either you or Kim, not both of you, one or the other of you, take her out for coffee or tea and sit down and start with exactly what you just said to me now. I really like you.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the fact that you are so dedicated to this organization, and I love the way you handle people in the trainings, the peer-to-peer groups, et cetera, et cetera. You are just brilliant at it. And because you're so good at all of that, I don't understand why you come after me and use the example that you gave with name calling or calling out NAMI or whatever in public. It just doesn't seem to fit with this other side of you. What's going on? But
Well, my only response to that, Carol, is that Kim and I both know this person very well. Kim knows her better than I do and works with her more closely than I do. And all I can say is she's aware of that. She's aware of herself, and occasionally she even apologizes, but not very often.
Well,
but she's
even if she's aware of it, sitting down across a table over a cup of tea and just saying, and then the next question to her is, she says, oh, I know, I do fly off the handle sometimes. I'm just distressed and I'm not going to do it anymore. And then you say, how can I help you not to do it? What could I do that would help you not to do it? Is there anybody in the organization who could help you? Could Kim help you? Because we really value the work that you do. And I love the fact that you love my dog. I mean, again, it's the keep your enemies or your friends close and your enemies closer. When I have what I call a red flag person in an organization where I know that person is going to be a potential problem in a training that I do or facilitation, I always ask that of people to find out who that person might be. And then what I try to do is call on them as much as possible and showcase whatever it is that they do well. Thank you, Sally, for saying that. That was a great idea. I'm not sure I totally get it, but I think it's really good that you brought up that point. I'm not sure if I agree with you, but it sure is an interesting perspective. Anything you could do, because these people, it's the old transactional analysis theory that says any stroke is better than no stroke. And so if I'm not getting positive strokes, I'll go for negative.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting recognized and I need to have people recognize me.
And
we've
asked her to take, more involved roles, like, I talked to her about being on the board. Oh no, I don't want to be on the board. And I think the reason she doesn't want to be on the board is because she knows that there would be a fight all the time.
Well, that's good. You don't ask her to be on the board.
No.
You just ask her if there's anything you can do to help her. And anything that anybody can do. And then every chance you get when you're around her, and it sounds sappy. I know it sounds sappy, but it's true. People like that need attention, and much better that you give them the attention, just like when a child is having a temper tantrum. You don't stroke them when they're having their tantrum. You wait till it's over. And then you say, boy, I'm really glad you were able to calm yourself. Yeah, it took an hour and a half, but here we are. Let's go have ice cream.
Yeah. Well, I think that I understand on some part of why this person acts the way they do. I know that she comes to NAMI and works there a lot just simply to get away from home, because she has a severely mentally challenged son who's very difficult to get along with, and she spends a lot of time away from home so she doesn't have to deal with that. I have a friend
in exactly that same circumstance, and it's very painful. And again, since you know that about her, one of the things you can do is acknowledge and say, I want NAMI to be a safe place for you, where you get lots of positive reinforcement, and you are a saint for taking care of this son. Again, it's stroking her for what she's doing. She's doing an amazing job, which many of us could not do.
Yes, she does. Her work is really, really important.
So tell her that as much as you can. And don't worry, psychologists say we need to have 5 compliments to offset 1 negative.
Yeah.
So, keep that statistic in mind. And this is a person who probably needs 10. So give it to her. It's not going to hurt you at all.
Kim, is there anything you want to say?
She's shaking her head no.
I see it. Okay, well, thank you.
Anybody else with a specific circumstance or issue? Deanna, I love this little girl. Who is this?
This is Maddie. COVID brought interesting things to everybody. And right before COVID, I got a phone call from the hospital to come pick a baby up. So
Oh, honey, I'm so happy for you. How old is Maddie now?
16 months.
She's very cute.
She knows it too.
And she knows it. Of course she does. Well, she has to, this is her chance to be a princess.
Yep. A NAMI princess.
A NAMI princess.
Okay,
I
7:16.
was gonna add
Oh,
that
go ahead, Donna.
sometimes people get involved because they need recognition,
Mm-hmm.
and that's their payment, is acknowledgement.
Mhm.
Since volunteers don't get paid, but they get
Yep.
paid in recognition
Yes.
and appreciation. So sometimes I've noticed that a board member or an active volunteer will start to act out because they don't feel appreciated. So we make a point of handing out awards
Mhm.
every year, and we also do regular appreciation to our volunteers. And I think that makes a big difference for folks, and they feel less of a need to become the center of attention because they're being recognized already in a positive way instead of a negative way.
By the way, that's an
Very good.
important skill, whether or not you have a problematic committee or board member. I am a big believer in celebrating. If you had a task and you're the committee chair and the task is complete, have a little gathering. Bring some chocolate and give everybody chocolate. Give awards. You can just do that on a Xerox machine, you know, in your computer at home. You know, most likely to sell more tickets than anybody else, most likely to clean up better than anybody else. I mean, they can be cute, but people love that.
Mhm.
They really do. And conversely, one year, this is a terrible story, but we made our budget. In fact, we exceeded our budget for the foundation that I was running. And I was thrilled because I always worried about that. And we came into our January board meeting and I announced we raised $100,000 more than budget. And everybody went, oh, good, and then moved on. And it was demoralizing. Just to say, great job. Wow. And the board chair had known in advance that we'd raised that money. If I'd been that board chair, I would have brought champagne and cookies. You know, I just believe in celebrating whenever possible. So thank you, Donna. That's really a great idea.
Carol, did you say there was one more part we needed to go over?
The only last part that we have here is that I listed at the end of the handout all of the committees that Lauren told me about.
Oh, those are
I
NAMI
know
Washington.
not all of the affiliates have all of these committees.
No,
But
they
what I
don't.
would like you to do is take these back, put down for yourselves who are the committees, what are the committees that you have, check with your bylaws as Lauren recommended to make sure that they dovetail with what your bylaws recommend, add any ad hocs, and then as you develop committee chairs, share them with the entire board, with the staff if you have staff, and share them with Lauren. So Lauren knows as the statewide director who's running the ship in what areas. Again, I'm a strong believer in open communication, and I think it's really, really important that everybody sort of knows who's in charge, what they're doing, and so on. So that's what that last piece is about.
And Goddess knows, those of you who've worked with me for a while can tell I really am a student of Carol's. I like that transparent communication, clarity of roles. I'm very direct, almost to the point sometimes of being offensive, for which I apologize, and I am constantly working on that.
Well, I have to say, I think NAMI Washington is a huge success. And I guess I want to end on that positive note. I know that all of you come from very small affiliates to very large ones. Some of you are with the statewide organization. Some of you may go to the national. But I feel when I talk about organizations that I work for, and I mentioned that I work for NAMI Washington, not one person has not said, what a great organization that is. What a great oh, I went to one of those trainings. Oh, I know so-and-so on the board. Oh, they really helped me when my son had a breakdown, when my husband had a breakdown, when I had a breakdown. They were incredibly helpful. I think what you do is wonderful. And I think you should all wear that as a badge of honor. So when you're an ambassador for your affiliate and for the state, you know that you can do that from a really good place. Oh, April, we have another baby. Who's that?
Not trying to upstage Maddie at all. I just had to take him from my husband. This is Logan. He's almost 6 months old.
Hi, Logan. It's nice to have you in the meeting.
Yeah, he's learning a lot.
Yeah, well, we need all these young progressives. So anyway, any last comments or questions that anybody has? Well, Lauren has my email. It's cpencke@gmail. You are welcome to send me an email if you want to ask me a question. If something comes up to you in the next month or so, I'm always delighted to answer questions. Don't expect me to respond at 2 in the morning because you wouldn't be at all able to understand anything I said, but I will respond. I'm pretty good at responding within a day or two. Okay? So I wish you all well and health, good health. Are we mostly vaccinated? Where are we in this crowd? Vaccinated?
Vaccinated,
yes.
vaccinated, yes.
Please, please
Yeah.
get your vaccinations. I just heard on the news today that Dr. Fauci said they're hoping to start vaccinating high school students this summer
Mhm.
and everybody by the end of the year. So we got to get there.
Yeah.
So folks, yes, I will send out the board matrix to all the affiliate leaders. There are a lot of thank yous, Carol, and Carol, thank you so much. And you know
Of
what?
course.
Well, I'll be back in touch with you, and I want to work with you to put something together to hone in more on other, just specifically board issues.
Okay.
And I would invite, the same kind of group of people too.
Good.
We can never get enough of that. And now that, NAMI Washington has been able to grow, we're, able to offer more and more of that. And that's another part of the state office's role, is to help with understanding running a nonprofit, whether you have staff or not, and what everybody's roles are. I mean, organizations have changed so much, and the boards are still at the heart of nonprofits, whether I think that's a good model or not. Read Uncharitable. And Carol, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, my pleasure, you guys. Thank you all. I'm honored to be part of this.
Yeah,
All
it's cpencke@gmail.com.
CPENCKE, all lowercase, @gmail.com. Bye, guys.
Bye.